Thank you for watching. Please like and share. Don't forget to click the subscribe button to my channel for updates. If you likes my videos, and my daily dedication to all my loyal subscribers, and would like to show financial support, you can do so via PayPal. Please see links below. Your financial support is greatly appreciated. Thank you.
The Earth is getting closer to the Sun. And here are 11 answers for you. Orbital mechanics are actually complex and chaotic. I don't mean with chaotic that there are no physical rules governing them. Of course there are, but that they fall under chaos theory. Chaos theory is probably best known for its butterfly effect, where a butterfly in Brazil may help cause a typhoon in the Philippines by the small input he gives into the displacement of air. To give one example, in a human lifetime we are of course never going to notice any change, but over millions of years and longer, it becomes more and more unpredictable. In fact, there's a name for the period over which we can do reasonable estimations. For our orbit around the Sun, the span of time is in the order of only a few tens of millions of years. That may seem like a long time since you and I are long gone by then, but considering the Sun still has about 5 billion years of life left in it, it means we really can't say how or where Earth is going to end up then. Are we going to be far away when the Sun swells up? Are we going to be absorbed in the Sun's radius when our star will become a red giant? Will we be swung out into the coldness of interstellar space? Or will we crash into one of the fellow planets that orbit the Sun? We can't say. People who study climate change over Earth's history know that this complicates things and have to take orbital changes into account. Let's highlight some of the complexities. 1. Earth's orbit is elliptical, not circular. To start this, let's make it clear that there's not just one fixed distance between the Earth and the Sun at all. It increases and decreases over the course of a year because, simplified, Earth has an elliptical orbit with the Sun at one focus of the ellipse. Even though that may not be a very eccentric ellipse, almost a perfect circle even, it's still significant since right there you have about 5 million kilometers difference already. Whatever distance our orbit changes further from or closer to the Sun in our lifetime will pale in comparison. Between January and July, we are gradually moving away from our shiny giver of life, while for the rest of the year we're moving back closer with that distance. Which, incidentally, is not the reason for the seasons. The tilt of the north-south axis to this elliptical movement is 2. The elliptical orbit precesses. This elliptical trajectory is not fixed in location. This route that Earth takes each year precesses, the points of closest and furthest passing move along. The main reason for the precession is general relativity, but it also happens slightly due to small tugs of the gravity of other celestial bodies. These tiny tugs have an effect over time. 3. The elliptical orbits of other planets are not perfectly ecliptic. Of the elliptical orbits of all the planets in our solar system, almost lay in one perfectly flat plane. Almost. What that means for our orbit around the Sun is that there will be tiny perturbations above and below the ecliptic too, pulls to below or above it, if you will. This makes the whole problem 3D and not just to move away or towards the Sun in one flat plane. 4. Tidal effects widen orbits. The Moon and the Sun work together to create tides on our planet, and every now and then make sure innocent tourists get caught out by high water lines somewhere so they can't make it back to the restaurant or their hotel before sitting it out for a few hours, anxiously hoping that the rise in water level stops before the tiny island they ended up on is completely submerged. Earth gets a stretch and a squeeze because of these tidal effects, and that's of course most noticeable on the liquids which are free to flow over the surface, the oceans and the seas. This causes bulges on our planet. It may seem strange that these bulges are not aligned with the gravitational pull from the Moon and Sun, but are a bit ahead of those axes. The reason is friction and time. As Earth rotates faster than the direction of the gravitational pulls, it tends to drag these bulges along with the faster rotation, and there's a lag in time for the adjustment to take place. These frictional forces make Earth's spin slow down, gently making our days last longer, while the bulges give a gentle gravitational pull on the Moon, pulling it forward in its orbit. That in turn makes the Moon want to increase its distance from the Earth gradually. Said in a fancier term, the angular momentum is preserved. Angular momentum is also preserved in the Sun-Earth case, of course. The effect is that Earth's years are stretched longer and longer, and our orbit around the Sun is widened, year by year, by a very tiny amount. As a consequence, planets have the tendency to end up in a spin-orbit resonance. In the case of Mercury, for example, a tiny planet close to the Sun that has felt this effect without mercy for these reasons, there's a 3/2 resonance. That means that 1 Mercury day lasts 2 Mercury years. Yes, Mercurians, if they existed, would celebrate 2 birthdays per day. Bring out the cake and give me those kisses, ladies. Another example of these tidal effects is that the Moon always faces the same side to us on Earth, give or take a few percent. I probably don't have to add that gravitational bulges on the Sun of other planets complicate this again. 5. The eccentricity of the orbits change in time. As if that's not complicated enough, the elliptical orbits change in eccentricity over time. This means that they can become a bit more circular at some times and a bit more elliptical at other times. At the moment, the Earth's eccentricity is reducing, so our orbit is becoming a bit more circular. That means there will be a slow reduction in the 5 million kilometers distance difference between January and July. 6. The Sun is losing mass, but also gaining a tiny bit. People often say the Sun is burning. This so-called burning is nothing like the burning of a match or your furnace. The Sun is powered by nuclear fusion. Chemical elements smash into each other in their high densities and temperatures and fuse into bigger or heavier chemical elements. These fusions of elements also cause a stream of other exotic particles, like positrons and neutrinos, and of course the gamma rays, which make our Sun so positively radiant. Thanks to this ferocious fusion, we here on Earth reap the benefits of the energy it provides us, enabling life in the first place. The Sun loses a whole bunch of particles because of it though, and therefore the Sun gets lighter and lighter gradually. This also puts a limit on the life of the Sun, since it won't have enough particles to fuse in eternity. Losing a little change every day can bankrupt you in the long term. Fusion is the main reason for mass loss of the Sun, with both mass lost due to actual particles lost but also due to the conversion of mass into energy, according to Einstein's famous equation E equals mc circumflex 2. But there's another reason the Sun loses mass. High energy particles in the Sun's atmosphere can get ejected and flow away. This creates a so-called solar wind, where Earth for one is bathing in. Apart from that, dust and meteors, comets and other things floating around in space can of course be pulled in by the Sun's gravity and cause mass gain. We on Earth are not the only ones who can get hit by meteors, after all. The Sun is much more likely to get hit by one. Considering that the loss of mass due to fusion alone is in the order of 4 million tons per second, it's safe to say that the gain of mass is insignificant in comparison. Most of the material floating around has been scooped up in the formation of the solar system already. The solar wind seems to blow off about 1.5 million tons of particles per second. That's a huge loss of mass. Yet considering the overall weight of the Sun, it's not a very big deal. But to be fair, considering that if the Sun loses mass and angular momentum has to be preserved, or the gravity gets a bit less if you'd like, the orbit of Earth should widen a bit because of it. over a year that seems to be in the order of centimeters. Peanuts. 7. Our planet is also losing and gaining mass. Our closest star is of course not the only celestial body subject to a diet and or weight gain. Earth has its own dietary program. For our piece of rock about 40,000 tons of weight is gained in the form of dust plus other particles, including particles from the solar wind. Cosmic rays can get absorbed too, contributing to a bit of mass gain. Global warming increases the weight by about 160 tons a year. But Earth loses more than it gains. Nuclear fission in the Earth's core causes a loss of around 16 tons a year, when heavy atoms like uranium disintegrate. Radioactive decay of other elements, including the decay caused by human activity and nuclear power generation, is responsible for a bit more. You'd probably think of the obvious loss of weight in sending space probes to do wonderful discoveries around other planets, yet that is really a very tiny amount of mass. The biggest debit lies in the loss of light gases, where the tiny particles can get enough kinetic energy to escape our planet's gravitational influence. In that way, we lose hydrogen in the order of around 95,000 tons a year and helium in around 1,600 tons. Overall, I've found a net loss of some 50,000 tons a year. Again, this weakens the gravitational influence, widening our orbit ever so slightly. 8. Other planets affect our orbit. As already suggested in the other points, Earth's orbit is not immune to the other planets. Other planets cause tidal bulges on the Sun, redistributing mass, and these in turn influence Earth's orbit. These planets of course also have a direct gravitational effect on us, and they are influenced themselves in turn by other planets, including Earth. It's all one big package of complex interactions, whereby each little change has a tiny effect on the rest, in turn having its own effect. This complex interaction is known as the n-body problem. 9. The Sun wobbles, as does Earth. It's also worth noting that the Sun doesn't just rotate around its own center of gravity. Rather, our star dances around a barycenter. That causes the Sun to wobble in the solar system, again changing the distance between Earth and Sun. Same goes of course for the Earth and Moon, where it's not as if the Earth has a certain distance to the Sun and the Moon orbits that. No, the Moon makes the Earth wobble on its trajectory as well, swinging us to the inside and to the outside of the average path and moving us away further and then again closer to the Sun. 10. The Sun expands. When you ask for a distance to the Sun, are you referring to the distance between the centers of gravity, or possibly between the geometric centers? Are you referring to the distance of the surfaces? If so, where do you define the surface? Will a part of the atmosphere do, or do you need something solid enough? What density do you consider the surface? The distance to the surface of the Sun will vary over time because the Sun swells up. That's because our star is dependent on a delicate balance, hydrostatic equilibrium pipe-wiki wand, between wanting to contract due to gravity and wanting to expand due to the pressure and temperature of the fusions and contraction taking place inside. Due to the loss of mass, but while fusion and contraction pick up pace, the gravity will lose out a little. That will weaken the pull on the outer layers, making them move outwards and swelling up our star while brightening it. Near the end of our star's lifetime, other types of fusion take over and it will swell even more, becoming a red giant as the cooling of the surface then will change the color. 11. Solar radiation and the solar wind exert a pressure on our planet. This flow of energy and particles from the Sun also exert a pressure on Earth, pushing it away as the momentum of the photons and particles does its job. Granted, it's small, but again, over the whole surface of Earth facing the Sun and over enough time, it adds up again. Related to that, and given that the Earth rotates around its own axis, there's even a very interesting resulting force, the Yarkovsky effect pipe wiki wand. That those should be such a small effect that it's usually only considered for small bodies orbiting the Sun, like asteroids or meteoroids. Conclusion. There are probably plenty of other small effects, all causing possibly significant differences in outcome over a long enough span of time. Often answers to a question like this only consider one or two aspects. As the joke goes with engineers, scientists will disregard everything that is inconvenient. People who make calculations here take certain assumptions and disregard other effects as well. That can be a great estimation, but it has its limitations, especially when time goes by. This doesn't mean that we can say absolutely nothing about it and should just give up and throw our hands in the air. It just means that you should add a time scale to whatever claim you make and specify what effects you take into account and disregard. To me it seems that the loss of mass of Sun, together with the tidal effect, the loss of mass of the Earth and the fact that the gravitational pull of other planets will be greater when they're closer to us in their orbits behind us from the Sun and not on the other side of the Sun than we are, that the orbit of Earth will widen and that we will not, in the reasonably short term, be moving closer to the Sun.